Imagine your dad spent 35 years working at the same company. Never missed a day. Never complained. Punched in at 7 a.m., punched out at 5 p.m. And every single year, he was told the same thing. Don't worry, your pension is taken care of. You'll retire comfortably. And he believed them. Why wouldn't he? He'd earned it. Then one day, about 5 years before retirement, something starts to feel off. The HR letters get a little vaguer. The company holds a restructuring meeting. And then quietly, almost without announcement, they tell him that his monthly pension benefit is being reduced significantly. He didn't make bad investments. He didn't get fired. He didn't do anything wrong. But somewhere in a boardroom, years before, accountants changed the way a number was calculated on a balance sheet, and your dad's retirement got caught in the crossfire. This is not a hypothetical. This happened to millions of real people. And the rule change that triggered it, most people have never even heard of it. My name is Tom, and I spend way too much time thinking about the hidden systems that quietly shape your financial life. If you're someone who has a pension, works for a company that offers one, or has a parent depending on one, and you want to understand what actually happened to one of the safest retirement vehicles ever created, make sure to hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Because today, we're going back to 1994, and I'm going to show you exactly how one line in an accounting standard quietly became one of the most financially destructive forces in modern retirement history. Okay, before we get into the chaos, let me set the stage. A pension, a traditional one, what's called a defined benefit plan, is exactly what it sounds like. Your employer defines the benefit you'll receive in retirement. You work for 30 years, you get $3,200 a month for the rest of your life. Simple, predictable, yours. The company manages all the investment risk. You don't have to worry about market crashes or picking the right funds or whether you saved enough. The company made you a promise, and they were legally required to keep it. Here's the thing. At their peak, pensions were dominant. In 1980, roughly 84% of private sector workers who had any retirement plan at all had a pension. Let that sink in. 4 out of 5 workers with a retirement benefit had a guaranteed monthly check for life. By 2022, that number had fallen to around 15%. So what happened? People will give you all kinds of answers. Companies got greedy. Workers stopped staying loyal. The stock market changed everything. And look, those things played a role. But there's a specific moment, a specific mechanism that most people never talk about. And it traces directly back to 1992 and 1993 with a slow motion explosion that detonated in 1994. Here's what most people don't realize about pensions. They aren't just retirement programs. They are financial liabilities that sit on a company's balance sheet. Every year, your employer has to calculate how much money they owe future retirees. And that number, that giant liability, has to be reported publicly if the company is traded on a stock exchange. Now, to calculate what they owe, they have to make assumptions. One of the most important, the discount rate. Stay with me here because this is where it gets really interesting, and I promise it's simpler than it sounds. Here's the analogy. Let's say someone owes you $10,000, but they don't have to pay you for 20 years. How much is that $10,000 worth to you today? Less than $10,000, right? Because if you had the money now, you could invest it and it would grow. The process of figuring out what future money is worth today is called discounting. The discount rate is basically the interest rate companies use to shrink future pension obligations into today's dollars. And this is where the 1994 rule, specifically SFAS number 87, implemented by the Financial Accounting Standards Board, started creating devastation. Before the rule changes took full effect, companies had some flexibility in how they smoothed out pension costs and reported the numbers. But beginning in the early 1990s, the FASB started tightening the standards. By 1994, full compliance was mandatory, and companies had to report pension costs and liabilities with much more precision and much more visibility than ever before. Here's what that meant in practice. Let me give you real numbers so this becomes concrete. Imagine a company has 10,000 employees. They've promised each of them an average pension of $1,500 a month starting at age 65. The average employee is going to live 20 years in retirement. That's $1,500 times 12 months times 20 years equals $360,000 per employee. Multiply by 10,000 employees, and you're looking at a $3.6 billion obligation. Now, the company doesn't need $3.6 billion sitting in a vault today. They need to have enough invested now so that it grows into $3.6 billion by the time those payments come due. That's where the discount rate comes in. If you use a 9% discount rate, which was common in the 1980s when interest rates were high, that $3.6 billion obligation discounts down to roughly $600 million in today's dollars. Manageable. The company funds $600 million, invests it wisely, and they're fine. But here's the kicker. When the new accounting standards forced companies to use more conservative, market-based discount rates, and then interest rates fell through the 1990s and into the 2000s, everything blew up. Drop that discount rate from 9% to 5%, and suddenly that same $3.6 billion obligation doesn't discount to $600 million anymore. It discounts to roughly $1.35 billion. The liability on the balance sheet just doubled, and the company didn't change a single promise to a single employee. They just changed the interest rate assumption in a spreadsheet. Now suddenly Wall Street is looking at this company's balance sheet and saying, you have a $1.35 billion pension problem. Stock price drops, credit rating takes a hit, CFO gets a panicked call from the board. And the easiest solution? Start freezing pensions. Stop offering them to new employees. Eventually, kill them altogether. Now you might be thinking, okay, Nick, but the obligations were real. If interest rates fell, the companies genuinely did owe more in present value terms. Wasn't this just accurate accounting? And that is a completely fair point. It was more accurate. That's not in dispute. But here's where the psychology gets dark. The new rules didn't just make pension obligations visible, they made the volatility of those obligations visible. Every year, as interest rates shifted, a company's reported pension liability could swing by hundreds of millions of dollars in either direction. And corporations, especially publicly traded ones, are psychologically allergic to volatility on their balance sheets. Think about it this way. You're a CFO. Your bonus is tied to quarterly earnings. Your stock options vest based on share price performance. And now there's this massive, unpredictable number on your balance sheet that can randomly swing by 20% based on whatever the Federal Reserve decides to do with interest rates. What do? You eliminate the source of the unpredictability. Even if eliminating it hurts your workers, even if it breaks decades of implicit promises. Because the accounting rule change shifted pensions from feeling like a compensation expense, the cost of employing good people, to feeling like a financial risk that needed to be managed and minimized. That is a profound psychological shift, and your retirement paid for. Let's step away from the spreadsheets for a second. Between 1998 and 2010, hundreds of major American companies, including names like IBM, Motorola, Sears, and Chrysler, either froze or terminated their pension plans. IBM alone affected over 125,000 employees when it froze pension accruals in 2006. Freezing a pension sounds gentle, like putting something on pause. But here's what it really means. If you're 45 years old, you've worked for a company for 20 years, and they freeze the pension, you keep whatever benefit you'd already earned. But from that day forward, every additional year of work adds nothing to your pension. You're still working, you're still loyal, but the meter stopped running. And for workers who are counting on those final high-earning years, when pension benefits typically accumulate fastest, this was devastating. A worker who expected $2,800 a month at retirement might now be looking at $1,100. Same job, same company, different balance sheet priority. Here's what most people don't realize about who got hurt the most. It wasn't the young workers who could pivot, open up 401k, start investing. It was the 50-year-old worker, the one who had built their entire retirement plan around the promise their employer had been making for 2 decades, the one who didn't have time to recover. Look, when companies killed pensions, they didn't leave workers with nothing. They handed everyone a 401k and said, "Here you go, freedom." And this gets sold as progress, as empowerment. You're in control of your retirement now. But here's the thing. There's a massive difference between a defined benefit and a defined contribution. With a pension, the risk sits with the employer. They have to figure out how to fund your $1,500 a month no matter what the market does. With a 401k, the risk sits entirely with you. If you don't contribute enough, if you pick the wrong funds, if you retire right before a market crash, that's your problem. And the data on how regular people handle that responsibility is not encouraging. The median 401k balance for Americans aged 55 to 64, the people closest to retirement, is approximately $87,000. At a standard 4% withdrawal rate, that generates about $290 a month. $290 a month after a lifetime of working. Compare that to the average pension payment for a private sector retiree with a traditional defined benefit plan, approximately $1,550 a month. The shift from pensions to 401ks didn't just change a retirement vehicle, it transferred an enormous amount of financial risk from institutions that were built to manage it onto individuals who, behaviorally and structurally, were never equipped to carry it. This is where it gets practical. Because I don't want you to walk away from this video just feeling angry. I want you to walk away with a plan. First, if you still have a pension, understand it completely. Get your summary plan description from HR. Find out your vesting schedule, your benefit formula, and whether your plan is frozen or open. If it's frozen, you need to know that now, not at 62. Also, and this is critical, check the funding status of your pension. The Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, the PBGC, insures most private pensions, but there are limits. As of 2024, the PBGC guarantee caps out at around $7,362 per month for a 65-year-old. Most workers are fine, but if you work for a company with a seriously underfunded plan, you need to know your exposure. If you're in your 30s or 40s and you're contributing 3% of your salary to a 401k and calling it investing, you are behind. Most financial planners recommend saving 15% of your income for retirement, including any employer match. And the math is brutal if you wait. Let me show you. If you're 35, earning $60,000, and you increase your contribution from 3% to 10%, that's an extra $4,200 a year. Invested in a low-cost index fund averaging 7% annual returns, that extra $4,200 a year turns into roughly $400,000 by age 65. $400,000 from one decision you can make this week. Third, learn to think in income, not in account balances. This is the biggest mindset shift most people never make. Your retirement goal shouldn't be, I want $1 million. It should be, I want $4,000 a month in retirement income. Work backwards from the income you need. That changes every decision you make. Fourth, if you're self-employed or your employer offers no pension, look at alternative structures. A SEP IRA allows contributions of up to 25% of net self-employment income, with a 2024 limit of $69,000. A solo 401k can be even more powerful if you're running your own business. These vehicles exist specifically to fill the gap left by the collapse of the traditional pension system. Here's the thing that stays with me about this whole story. The people who got hurt the most by the 1994 accounting rule change weren't reckless. They weren't irresponsible. They weren't gamblers who lost the bet. They were workers who did exactly what they were told to do. They showed up, they stayed loyal, they trusted the system. And the system, for reasons that had everything to do with balance sheets and nothing to do with them, changed the rules mid-game. I'm not telling you this to make you feel helpless. I'm telling you this because the greatest financial mistake you can make today is trusting that any institution, a company, a government program, a pension fund, has your retirement more figured out than you do. Nobody cares more about your financial future than you do. Full stop. The good news? You have tools available to you right now that the 50-year-old IBM worker in 2006 didn't have. Low-cost index funds, Roth IRAs, information like this video available for free at any time. The question isn't whether the system is fair. It isn't. The question is what you're going to do with what you know. Start today. Increase your contribution rate by even 1%. Pull your pension documents and actually read them. Have the uncomfortable conversation with your spouse about what retirement actually costs. Small moves made consistently are how ordinary people build extraordinary financial security. If this video gave you one thing to think about, one action to take, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below telling me, do you have a pension, a 401k, or are you figuring it out on your own? I read every single one. And if you want to go deeper on retirement systems most people have never heard of, the next video is right there. I'll see you in it.